In association with Get a Tax Rebate, 1895 Sports, Mesa Vienna Aesthetics, CDX Security.
Okay, welcome to another edition of the Oddball Woody Show with a special guest today from the rugby league world. It's something that got me really interested. There's a project that I'm working on ahead of the game with Rugby League Curs, and this week it was my task to do an icebreaker. So one of the things that I did was I asked everybody who was participating in that meeting is to get an item and tell us a brief description. And this person came on and had some meditation beads and said it reminded him to meditate twice a day and be mindful. And that just got me very, very interested in this character. Now, this guy was classed as one of the world's best players in his prime. New Zealand international, Bradford Bulls, Huddersfield Giants, Salford Red Devils, Lee Centurions, won everything there is within the game of rugby league, and that's Robbie Hunter-Paul. How are you doing, Robbie?
I'm good, Woody. Very good, thank you. Had a wonderful weekend this weekend. Watched the rugby yesterday, and I've been for a long walk with my kids today. So been a good weekend.
Good stuff, mate. Good, and we'll touch on the project that we're currently involved in ahead of the game later on. And but first of all, obviously you reside in the UK, but you're New Zealand born, as we can tell from your accent. And just tell us a little bit about growing up in New Zealand.
Hey, it was great. I got to admit, for those that are new to the rugby world or don't know much about my generation of rugby, I had an older brother that played rugby. He does run around the world at the moment telling everyone that I'm the older brother, but he actually is older than me. 2 years my senior. His name's Henry Paul, ex-Wigan. Let me name his clubs now. Wigan, Bradford Bulls. Then he went to Gloucester Rugby Union, Harlequins Rugby League. And then while he was at Wigan, he went to Bath for an off-season as well, played some rugby union at Bath. And then he ended up at Leeds Carnegie, where he finished his professional career. And it was wonderful having an older brother, 2 years your senior. So his birthday is February the 10th, mine's February the 3rd. So we're almost exactly 2 years apart. Henry was he was an incredible personality. He was just, I always thought he would have been better. You know, as you get older, you're a little bit longer in the tooth, you be a bit retrospective. He was so disciplined, so personally disciplined as an athlete that I always thought he probably would have made a better golfer or tennis player. Purely and simply is because when we were growing up, he didn't play well with others. You know, it had to be Henry's way or no way. And you can imagine what it was like, because when he came to Bradford from Wigan, and that Wigan team was all conquering, I was his captain. I'm his younger brother, and yet I'm the captain. I'm the guy that makes sort of the decisions. Oh, Woody, you should have seen the amount of times the boys had to pull us apart in the change rooms, pull us apart on the field. You know the way family are. They were just at each other all the time. But what it did do, growing up, it brought the best out of me because he was 2 years my senior, so I had to compete with someone 2 years physically more developed. And Henry was a brilliant and awesome athlete on his own right. So then I had to not only step up to someone who was physically older and bigger and more skillful than me, but I had to step up to someone who was exceptional for his age group as well. So I always think out of the two of us, Henry was definitely the more dominant, definitely the pace setter, and I was more the laid back kid that just sort of like Henry. It was interesting. Henry used to say, God, everything just comes so naturally to me. You know, things that he would spend 2 years or a year or months trying to perfect, I'd pick it up like that. Again, one of those things in retrospect, what Henry's not realizing is all the mistakes that because I'm his younger brother. I'm living in his shadow. I'm sitting on his shoulder just watching everything he did. And every time he has a breakthrough, who does he talk to? He talks to me. I said, no, you got to get your hand around it. You got to do it like this. So what takes him 6 months to do, once he gets it, he teaches me best practice straight away. So it wasn't natural. He was just making the mistakes for me, if that makes sense. You know, my talent became good because I stood on the shoulders of a giant, and that was my brother. And I take my hat off to him as well, because that personal drive that he had brought the best out of him and actually dragged me up. And he probably had no idea that he did that he achieved that. And it instilled, and with me, a sort of work ethic, a love for the creative, because Henry was really creative as an athlete. He would try all the weirdest things, and he would do things. I mean, his first ever game on TV, and this is no word of a lie, in New Zealand's first grade. So every now and again they put a rugby league game on TV in New Zealand for the senior grades. His very first game, he tried to chip kick in his own in goal. It was the wettest day ever. He miskicked it, chipped it. One of their players came through and scored. But it was just, Henry had no fear. And he instilled that in me. So, you know, when he came to Bradford and it was just the two of us, we were pretty ruthless with each other. We accepted nothing but the best. And when you weren't on your game, you were going to get an airful. And there were times when Henry just wasn't on his game. He just wasn't at the races, and he copped it from me. I think that was hard for him to deal with. Just, you know, the kid that he'd beaten up his whole life. A lot of people don't know, Henry's also black belt in Taekwondo. And it's a horrible sport if you're the younger brother, because they throw you and twist you and lock you. And so what Henry would do, he'd come up to me and, like, I remember this one thing real clearly, come up and kneed me in and just give me a dead leg, kneed me in the thigh. And then, you know, you just, as a kid, you just see red. And I'm just there swinging, just throwing punches. And he's just like, and then grabs me, puts me in a lock, puts me on the ground, and then whispers in my ear, calm down. After kicking me, smashing me. And then he's going, now calm down. I'll let you go if you calm down. And I'm just there, and like my arm's stuck behind here, and I can barely breathe. Just like it was a typical, you know, two teenage boys growing up. But him and my dad was also one of my coaches, so I got to take my hat off to my dad as well. My dad was very similar to Henry. He just tried to do things at practice, do weird things, flick behind the back passes, keep trying and get them wrong at training so you can get them right in the game. So he'd have like all the boys just bobbling balls over, you know, tipping up and doing behind the back, passing the ball behind the back. And I just remember thinking that's really quiet, because then you got into the structure game and everyone tried to coach that out of you. And I remember just in my own head saying, well, these guys don't know. They don't know better. And then come along coaches like Brian Smith and Matty Elliott and Nobby, who was, you know, part of that same stable. And what they did, it was sort of like they got that creativity slant, but they just taught you how to control it. And I think that was what was really cool. And being able to control it made the difference between being able to do it repetitively and keep your position within a really competitive team, and then go on to enjoy some success, which you mentioned before. So, you know, I've never ever seen any type of success done purely and simply from, you know, that person on their own. It's always been because they've had the right people around them, and they've been able to see the view by standing on the shoulders of giants. And luckily for me, you know, I had some of the best in the game that I got to stand on their shoulders.
Yeah, you can see that, you know, you've got a lot of respect there for your brother, which is good. You know, the brotherly love's there. You can see that, and you know, it's good that you say, you know, that you had the your own initiative really to look at Henry and then say, well, he's got the blueprint of how to do it, and I can copy him. And I remember I always mentioned that I was lucky enough to watch Wigan in the 90s, and Henry Paul was actually, all that Wigan team from like 93 up to about 97, they was all my idols. But I remember,
crazy good, weren't they?
Oh man, they were brilliant, and I always say it. I've probably said it about 5 or 6 times during the podcast. Is that they were like Hollywood movie stars in Wigan, and I always remember. I remember this. This is one of my first memories of seeing one of the Wigan rugby players, and it was Henry walking past me in Wigan Market, and as he walked past me, he's this big human. I'm about 12 years of age, and I'm just like in awe of Henry Paul. And, like you say, he came to Wigan and he had all the tricks and he was chipping over and stuff. But it wasn't really seen that often. Like you say, he'd do it in his own 20 and it'd come off. He was surrounded by great players and these kicks would come off. And it was just fantastic to watch. So, again, I think
you should have seen what it was like to play against. Oh, it was horrible. Horrible.
I was fortunate enough to play against him a few times. I mean, and again, mate, I don't.
No, I mean that entire Wigan team. Oh. Yeah, like I grew up as a kid in New Zealand watching the Challenge Cup finals. So every final from about 1985 onwards, and then you had like Sammy Parnapa. You had the 2 Iro brothers when they were both at Wigan. Dean Bell. They're just that conveyor belt of some of New Zealand's greatest all-time players. And obviously as a Kiwi, you just connect with them. So I connected with that Wigan team. So I come over in 1994 and I've got to run out against, Andy Farrell and Jason Robinson.
Vaianga Twigamala, Frano Botico, two more
I've still got a handprint on my chest where Inga fended me off and knocked me back into the stands. It comes into scene. I saw it on Sky because we played them. I played for Bradford Northern. Ingham makes a break down the left-hand side. I'm second line of defence, when the Bobby used to have a Bobby. Yeah. And I come at because I was back in those days, when I was 19, 20, 21 years of age, I was quick, man. I come out into shot like an exocet missile. I came that cut past, flying straight into Inga, and Inga's just boom. And I've gone back as fast as I came forward. I just went whack. And honestly, I remember looking up at the sky and thinking, what just happened then? Oh, great. He just destroyed me. Then he scored the try, he walked back and he picked me up. That's just how he picked me up. He patted me on the bum. You okay? Because Inga is just the loveliest man in the world. He is. Give me a cuddle. Made sure I was all still in one thing.
And that, do you know what? As a Wigan fan, I used to sit on the stand on the terraces. And that was the frustration with some of the Wigan fans, is that he was too nice. They used to say if he has a bit of aggression in him and a bit of shithouse in him, it would have been great. But he seemed like a very humble bloke.
As someone who played against him weekly, no, I like to just keep them the way. Just imagine it. Imagine if he was nasty. I mean, because what if he had gone into the forward pack and started doing stuff like that to them? Inga was just sort of like God had given him his gifts, and he was just happy enough to sit in that space and deliver them, and not take liberties, not go beyond anything more, and look after little fellas like me. Well, it was good next thing.
Yeah. There's just going back a little bit there. What was the reason to bring you over to the UK from New Zealand, Robert?
Oh yeah, it was Henry. So Henry had come to. Henry had been on a tour 93, 94. So JK's, and he was their captain, and he got picked up by Wakefield. Asked him if he'd like to play the back end of the 93, 94 season, and Henry Henry played awesome for Wakefield, by all accounts, because I'd run into so many Wakefield fans just remember his time there. But one standout game was against Wigan, where from fullback he literally just tore them to shreds single-handedly. And Maurice Lindsay was like, that Wigan back in the early 90s, if there was a player that they got. And Henry was contracted to New Zealand Warriors, and John Mooney was going to the New Zealand Warriors that following year. And John was really desperate to take Dennis Spetz and Andy Platt down just to harden up that New Zealand Warriors forward pack, give them some real experience. So they agreed on a deal where Dennis and Andy would go to New Zealand and they would release Henry to Wigan. And Henry came back to New Zealand. What he did was, in an interview, I think after that match, he said, I've got a younger brother back in New Zealand who's as good as I am, if not better. And on the strength of him saying that, Bradford offered me a contract. Because I hadn't played on TV. I had played a handful of senior games, and they rolled the dice. They took a risk. But I think my first game over here was woeful as well. We played Wakefield's second team at home. Honestly, I couldn't hold the ball. It was a wet night, and I found my space. I actually had got myself into like running some good lines, playing off the halves. Where Neil Holding, who was the halfback for the second team at that point in time, he'd actually created some good space, and I got into gaps about 3 or 4 times, and I knocked on every single one of those times. I just couldn't hold it, and I remember. I think I heard a few plays on here, or right one here. Luckily for me, though, we had a game, so that was on the Wednesday, and then we backed up again only a few nights later and played Halifax, which was a bit of a second team still, but it was a bit of a local derby, and there were some guns playing. I scored a hat-trick in that game. Did some magic footwork and that sort of stuff, so they thought, okay, well, we'll give them a little bit more time. What they got with me was someone who's really always been hardworking. I got like when it comes to the physical side of the game, I'm willing to do the hours of work and stuff like that. I remember Brian Smith. So fast forward a year, and Bradford Northern becomes Bradford Bulls. Change in coaching, and they embrace that Australian approach to coaching. Brian Smith comes over, and he comes over as CEO. And the first thing he does is he just wants to review everything. So the first thing they're doing is reviewing the playing staff. And you just see players, the first team just start going, whoa, walk through with a scythe and just starts cutting the first team out, replacing them with, journeyman Australian players, and also some of the best young championship talent coming through. And I was one of those players that were lucky enough to, work hard enough that they thought, oh, well, actually, he's worth a roll of the dice. But a breakthrough for me really was Brian pulling me aside. Brian took me under his wing. He spent a lot of time working me and turning me into a halfback, because what I was probably someone who played standoff but attacked like a fullback. Didn't really more interested in, but only came into the games in real drifts and drabs. But had some nice tools with good acceleration, good strength for someone my size, so I could pull out of tackles and a good sidestep, good footwork. But he pulled me aside and he said, "You know what? In training, you're incredible. You look at your stats, your fitness. You just destroy everyone." Which I was. I was a really good trainer. He said, "But you train harder than you play." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "In the games, you're just conserving energy all the time. And actually, what we need you to do is get the ball in your hand and run more. So I'm going to do some things. I'm going to change the style of your game." And one of the things that he did was, so I had to go to acting half once a set and just run out of acting half. So back in those days, as you can imagine, there was like corrugated iron defense. People, the Australian sort of condensed defense and sliding, we were the first team to start doing that. So most teams still had this sideline to sideline stuff, and people trundled forward at different speeds. And marker was a position where you had a rest. And he said, you need to get in an acting half. And whenever there's a body on the ground, your job is to run. You're not allowed to pass. You just got to get out of there and just try and get in behind the ruck. And that changed my game, because I started getting more contact with the ball. And the other thing that he did was Graham Bradley. I don't know if you remember Graham Bradley.
Yeah. Penguin,
horrible, horrible Australian, lanky thing. Brilliant player to play on your side, but a horrible man if you were playing against him. Some of the things he'd do in the tackle, I was like, oh, man, I'm so glad you're on my team. Because that's just horrible. But he got given the job to just ride me in the games. So I had this big 6'5", lanky string of Aussie accent just in my ear, or support, you lazy fucking Kiwi little, get up and support. I was supporting everything just because he was just in my ear. And I was going, and then that became a natural part of my game. So as we got better as a team, my natural part of my game was to start taking a few steps. I was then starting to get used to carrying the ball into contact. He did this one exercise where he made me, basically, he just got 3 front rowers, put them in a 10-meter grid, which is obviously in 10 meters is nowhere to go. It felt like 3 hours, but it must have been about 15 minutes. He just said, beat them. You're not allowed to pass. You're not allowed to pass, so you just got to try and beat them. And basically, I just got bashed for 15 minutes, just absolutely hammered. But at the end of the 15 minutes, he goes, "You're all right, aren't you?" And I said, "Oh, I guess so. You know, I've just been hammered for 15 minutes." He said, "You carried the ball in that space of time. You carried the ball over 30 times, and you're still alive. You need to carry the ball more." And it just these little things, and just constantly, like we do video sessions together. This is where you need to be. That's where you need to be. I think in the records, I'm the highest try scorer that Bradford's ever had.
Yeah, you are.
75% of those tries come from that work. It's just me trundling up the middle, support play. If that hadn't happened, I would never have. I don't think I would ever have been the player that I became. But once that happened, I had to then learn how to step back as well. So it was quite an interesting thing, because it's one thing, okay, once you got those tools, but then to win silverware, it's about the us. It's never about the me. It can't be about the me. And when you got players the quality of Henry, Jimmy Lowe's, Paul Deacon, Leon Price, when you got those guys starting to come up around you, it's always got to be about us. And it's when you get all of those moving, brilliant talent into synergy, and that's when you get back-to-back silverware. So we were able to crack that nut in 2000, and for the next, I guess, half a decade. So 2000 was a Challenge Cup, 2001 was a Super League, 2002 World Club, 2003 Challenge Cup and the Super League, League Leaders Shield, 2004 World Club, 2005 Super League, 2006 was the World Club again. So that unit, just in that little golden era, that's where the fruits of those labours from 1996 and beyond, the learning, going through those hard yards and learning how to win, figuring out that it's about everyone turning up at that time. It's about taking your mindset to another level when you go into the Super League playoffs. It's about taking your mindset to another level when you get to the semi-finals and the finals of the Challenge Cup. You have to learn how to win. You can win one-off. If you get lucky, you can invest it into one-off, but to be a team that creates a legacy, it's about back-to-back silverware and going on those runs. And oh man, isn't it? I got to admit, in retrospect, I sometimes step back and I say, how lucky was I? How blessed was I that I got to be a part of that? And it's something that it becomes very humbling as you get older, because you watch everyone going about the business now, and you still you think to yourself, well, in my day, I would have done this. But like I'm sitting sideline during the two quarterfinals at the AJ Bell Stadium, and I'm right next to the action. I'm looking at these guys just pounding each other for 80 minutes. And I just think to myself, I'm so happy I sit behind a computer now, just tapping away. Thank God I'm a digital marketer and not doing that anymore. And I also think to myself, how did I do that? Oh, I take my hat off to them all now, and I take my hat off to what we did, and I take my hat off to those that went before, because playing rugby at that level, at the highest level during whatever generation, it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone.
At Get a Tax Rebate, we make it easy for you or your business to claim back thousands of pounds in tax. Most people, like Jane and Philip, don't realise that they are owed money from HMRC, so they never claim. All you need to do is fill out a simple form on our website and we'll do the rest. It's that simple. We've also helped business owners claim back millions of pounds in research and development R&D tax credits. So if you're working in a business or own one, contact us today to see if we can help you claim back tax and improve your cash flow. Get a Tax Rebate, your tax refund concierge.
(1895) Sports and State of Mind, the ultimate lineup.
Macy Vienna Aesthetics, based in Wigan. For all your wrinkle treatments, dermal fillers, lip enhancement, energy boost injections, immune boost injections. Please visit us on Facebook or Instagram at Macy Vienna Aesthetics.
CDX Security, proudly supporting Rugby League.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm listening to you there, and I'm listening to you tell the stories about Brian Smith, and I can picture it. I don't know Brian Smith, never been coached by him, but obviously being coached by Tony, and I can see where it's going, and so many similarities there with Tony. The drills that we used to
say, apple and tree, yeah.
Oh, mate, 100% there. I can just tell with your stories. I mean, Tony was very similar, and this is one of the things that I try and take over to the amateur game when I'm doing amateur sessions. They all expect this big, complicated session where there's cut-out balls and loads of things to remember. And the most beneficial drills that we did at Warrington, and Tony came into Warrington and brought some success. We won 3 Challenge Cups, League Leaders Shields, failed in the grand final, but we was there and thereabouts. But it were the simple, basic drills that really got us into them positions, and more. And you touched on it there, taking your mindset higher. Sort of. Giving yourself impossible goals, really, and really setting the bar high. And Tony was I think that was the next step for Warrington when Tony came in. So I can see that Brian Smith's come in there and done a very, very similar job, but obviously with more success.
That's all it was. The amount of time, I'm standing there. I'm a New Zealand international. I've got at least a dozen international caps under my belt. I'm stood there with a man a metre away from me. I got my ball with my thumbs around, flicking passes to and from, and doing that for 15 minutes. Always about the basics. It's always about the basics, because the big wonderful things do come off, but it's I think a big piece of it is when you get fatigued, what your default setting is, and if your default setting is wrong, and because in rugby league you're going to get fatigued. It's a damn certainty you're going to get tired. It's just how we play the game. So if your default setting is doing the right things, those, passing the ball properly, setting it up, taking the movement out of the ball, making it the easiest catch possible, catching the ball in 2 hands, the repetition of all of that sort of thing, muscle memory, that it becomes your default setting, and that means that you'll make less mistakes. You'll have more ball. You get more opportunities to score tries, starve them of the ball, less opportunities for them to score tries, you win the game. It's kind of, when you break it down like that, it seems really kind of simple. And it's got to be, because let's be honest, Woody, we're all simple creatures, us rugby players. The simpler they can make it for us, the better.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going off track a little bit here, but I find that no matter whatever I do in life, it's always that simplicity and then foundations. I need that first. You know, stepping away from rugby now and going into a real world situation where we've got proper jobs. Even now, those characteristics have not left me. You know, I revert back to that. Right, I need to know the basics of this, and I need to do them well. And when I've done it, it tends to work for me. You know, I don't need to do the big play, even in a business sense. You know, it's the basics that seem to get us what we need.
I'm with you. During lockdown, so what I do for a living now, I've got a digital marketing company. So we based our thing on this thing called inbound marketing. But during lockdown, it gave us an opportunity to work remotely, but equally focus on some development into new services that we can offer. So coming out of lockdown, we now have this massive. I mean, we can probably offer our clients maybe 80% more than what we did going into lockdown. And that was not necessarily a good thing. So it started becoming a little bit crazy for me, because I was like, well, where do we focus on now? You know, we're only a small agency. What am I? And then, so just through a little bit of a process over the last 3 to 4 weeks, I've gone focusing, getting in closer. I'm back to those basics again. So just what you're saying, that the 20% of what built the business in the first place, that is our core. And that has got to be our focal point. It is where the lowest hanging fruit is. And that's where we've got to be the best version of ourselves. And yeah, bang on what you're saying. It's back to basics again. It's not, life doesn't have to be that complicated. I think we complicate things. So taking all aspects of bringing it back to its basics probably is extremely fruitful for every aspect of what we do.
Yeah, I think we'll touch on the mindfulness later on, but I'm a big believer in balance today. You know, I think that balance, and I think that good. I think, you know, we're sort of touching on that here. You know, where if you want to put it in a rugby-related term, I think, you know, having the flair, you know, and then doing the basics, and then putting them together and sort of meeting in the middle. I think, you know, if we can do that, generally we're not too far. I think it's, for me, I'm in danger of going off track if I become too extreme in one area, or I go too conservative in another area. So I've always got to bring myself back and think, you know what, I need to get some balance back here and refocus.
Yeah, totally agree.
Just talking on the on responsibility as well, because, you know, to at Bradford at a young age, you know, he was 20 years of age. Brian Smith then made you captain of the Bradford Bulls. So, you know, I can take myself back to a 20-year-old and playing rugby and thinking, wow, what a responsibility that must have been at that age, you know. And you've already touched that you had an older brother in the team as well, so probably a double whammy in that one. But, you know, you such a successful team. You had grand final in 99, 2001, you know, which you won against Wigan. You had your 2002. And then for me, the special year for Bradford was that 2003 year. That was one of them fixtures where you looked at it and you was like, there's not many people I want to run at in that team, but you managed to do the treble. Just tell us a little bit about that setup and some of the players that you was in there that drove that team, really.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to what I asked about first, and that was a responsibility. Now, back in, you know, I was gifted the captaincy. You remember I was saying before that when Brian Smith and Matty Elliott come over, they started clearing house. So all the first teamers started going, being replaced. Well, we went through the centenary season, which was the last winter season in 1995. We're making up at squad every week. So we're kind of just throwing together a team because we didn't know who was going to be there from week to week, and new players were coming in. One of the reasons why I was given the captaincy during that season was because I was the only Bradford Northern player. You know, I was the only one left. There was me and Brian McDermott, and Macca came off the bench because Carl Fairbank was injured. So Carl Fairbank was the captain, but he was injured. He was out. Brian McDermott was coming off the bench, so he couldn't lead the team onto the field, and I was the last man standing. So Brian Smith would come out to me every game. So he goes, so 5 minutes before the referee would call the captains together for the coin toss, Brian Smith would come over and go, okay, you're going to be captain today. You know, you got to lead by example, and you might not be captain next week. I heard that the whole season. The whole season. That was my prep talk, was that I had to go out and earn the captaincy every game. So it wasn't really until sort of halfway through 1996 where I was actually kind of the captain. One of the things though that would work for Bradford is that they really heavily, if you remember the match day experience at Bradford with all the dancing girls, and it was almost a festival every single game. So they targeted children. I was a kid myself, so I was a perfect poster boy to be sort of leading the charge. So there was a marketing element that I think Brian stumbled upon, though the man is smart enough to know that actually that would be a good tool as well. But I think what he had to do, by doing it from week to week, he had to see whether or not I would thrive under that pressure of what you're talking about, or fail under it. You know, he identified in me that there was a kid with some unique talents with his footwork and his speed and his attitude, but putting all that weight of responsibility on his shoulders, we have to see how he deals with that. And he was really smart in how he dealt with it, because he put next to me these really experienced on-field leaders. So I had Jimmy Lowes, I had Graham Bradley, I had Steve McNamara. I had these three-pronged attack who really were, for our 96, 97 seasons, as I was starting to come of age and learning my role within the team. You know, I went on to play international in 97 as well. So that gave me another boost of experience, responsibility, and confidence. So by 98, I had, after mixing with these great on-field leaders that we had a recipe for success by 98, 99. And that then started to roll forward by adding more talent to the team. So Henry comes on board in 1999. Joe Vaganar, Michael Withers come on board 2000, 2001. To that, then Leslie Vainicolo, Shantane Harper, and all of this, and Leon Price is also coming of age as well. We've got Tavita Vaikona during the late 90s, probably was out and out the best winger, if not in the top three in the competition. During the late 90s, we had him on one wing. We had Leslie Vainicolo, who just started to grow up come 2003. All of this mixture. And then we had the awesome foursome, where Brian McDermott would just go into the team, do all the ugly stuff and conserve energy for Paul Anderson at his height, Joe Vaganar at his height, and Stuart Fielding coming into his own. So we had this punch and a really, really intelligent hooker, someone who's just so smart and could read the game. Jimmy is he's a little fat man. Jimmy coached you for that many years. Jimmy the Keg, as he was called. He's not fast, not the strongest bloke in the world, but mate, so intelligent. Just knew how to keep going at the seam. He'd send someone into the punch, and he'd spot a hole. He'd spot an opportunity. Someone's tiring, and then he'd just direct it into them, and bang, bang, and then they would give him the opportunity to jump. And one of the things that really worked really well for me is I started to learn Jimmy's tells. So when Jimmy basically would look at me with this glazed look, I knew it was on. So it was like, Jimmy, give me the fucking ball, I want the ball. And then he'd look at me deep in the eyes, but I know he wasn't. And I'm like, oh, Jimmy's seen something here. And I just start moving forward. Jimmy would take a jump, he may not make a break, or he may just beat one person, but then you've got to be in that space for him. And, you know, and Henry, seamless. When I played with Henry, it was seamless with Henry, knew that. Leon, you know, one of my strengths was always being able to read the players around me and read their body language and know there's something on here. And that then became indicative throughout the whole team. So when you get to 2003, that nucleus of that squad has matured. You know, Paul Deacon is no longer the baby-faced assassin. He's a young man playing Great Britain International. Leon's come of age. Jamie Peacock's come of age. JP is not the skinny kid who used to run out wide for the Bulls anymore. Now he's a fully fledged England, Great Britain international that's splitting Australians open all over the park. We had Lee Gilmore was in the squad as well. So we just, I mean, I could just list the names. All
Mike Forshaw was another one.
Oh, Royce was different because he was one of the old guard. And he did the stuff that no one else wanted to do. Yeah. He's one of those players that really didn't get a lot of the plaudits because he wouldn't get over the try line, but he's what the players knew. Yeah. He was the players' player of the season because he'd do the nasty stuff. He'd do the grimy stuff. He'd do the 42 tackles. He'd be the guy diving in and taking people's legs out and then being the guy that has to get up and trundle back onside, get onside in time to turn around to fill in the gap. And then, you know, he'd make a tackle, he'd make a cover tackle on the right-hand side of the field. They'd spin the ball all the way off to the left. And you don't know how, but Royce has made the cover tackle on the left-hand side of the field. I remember the video session where Maddie's going, well, I don't know if it was Maddie or Nobby's going, watch this. And make a breakdown there. Royce makes his tackle. Then he's over making the safety tackle on the opposite wing and saves the try. And like, it's just those moments you just get up and you go, as a player, you go, that's our benchmark. That's where we have to be. I remember he did with Bernard Dwyer. Bernard Dwyer, Challenge Cup final, the week before the Challenge Cup final, goes to the tackle, tears his bicep. Still plays in the Challenge Cup final. That is, that's my son. Just do some work. Okay? Yeah, I'll come in a bit. Okay? In a bit. About 20 minutes. Now, Daddy's doing some work now. I'm coming. So the week before the final, he tears his bicep. Then he makes it through. We play the Murrayfield Challenge Cup final up in Edinburgh, and I remember saying to Bernard at the end of that final, I said, Bernard, do you want to lead us up? Because this was Bernard's 6th final. He played in 5 beforehand, 4 for Saints, 3 for Saints, 2 for the Bulls, and lost them all. And this was, he was retiring the following year. I said, Bernard, do you want to lead us up? And he goes, no, Robbie, it's enough for me. I've finally done it. And that's what I wanted. And so I led the team up. The very next game, so we played, because, backlog of games, we played Hull on the Wednesday night, I think. And Bernard goes into a tackle with his left arm and tears his other bicep. This one's already done. And then he tears that one. And what Bernard, he gets out, runs back into the defensive line, and runs forward and makes the tackle with his head. Gets up and finishes out the set and then goes to the sideline. He wasn't going to let his... And so we're doing the video with Matty. Matty goes down and goes, watch. And this tackle, when Brennan makes that left-hand tackle and tears his final bicep, so this guy's career is now over. He knows it's over. He knows it's over. What does he do? He gets back in the line and watch. He goes up and he makes another tackle. That's what this game's about. That's what it's about. And for us, that created the new benchmark. That created, this is where we've got to take our team to. This is where your mindset's got to go to. And we were all affected by that. And like the stories that we saw, those opportunities to show that sort of exceptional personal dedication is what creates legacy teams, not winning teams that create legacies. And that then becomes a virus, because that becomes the standard. If you don't live up to that, then you're kind of not accepted by that. That's the culture of the team. That is who we are. And that's what we got to enjoy post 2001. It was that coming together of all of that understanding, and then it probably can never be better described than that 2003 season. Millennium Stadium down at Cardiff. Holding on to the win to beat Leeds. I mean, because that was supposed to be Jimmy wasn't even supposed to be playing that season. He was supposed to retire, but Nobby asked him to play on another season. So I said to Jimmy, Jimmy, look, lead us up. And Jimmy said, yeah, okay.
Yeah, Jimmy would do.
Push me behind, went up, kissed the trophy, left it. He was straight in there.
Yeah.
And then come the end of the seasons, obviously we picked up the League Leaders Shield. I broke my arm a couple of games after that Millennium Stadium game, and the boys just went on to strength. They played awesome rugby all season long. And I remember I came back just for the final, and I came on just to give Jimmy a rest. So I come on the last 10 minutes of the first half, so he could conserve his juice for the second half, and then I played about the last 15 minutes of the second half. And it was really, we're talking about, Jimmy, because Jimmy led our team onto the field, whilst I was injured, and he was the captain during that time. And Jimmy, at the end of that 2003 season, when we went up, Jimmy goes, "You're coming with me. We're both going to lift this trophy together." Mm-hmm. And I thought, that's a mark of Jimmy. He's that's that caring, sharing side, and that he's not bigger than anything. Well, it was either that or he was too tired to lift the trophy up. The heavy trophy. Could have been either. But it's great. I was just sort of like, some moments catch you as a player, but we're supposed to be tough and we're not supposed to cry in public. But that was a moment that caught me. Jimmy saying, "No, let's go do this together. We started this together. Let's finish it together. Go up and both of us lifted the trophy together." And it was just, for me, that was a really sweet moment.
Yeah, I always remember that 2003 season, and Bradford just being that dominant force and having, again, going back to balance. I think you had the workhorses, you had the guys who wanted to do your graft, but then you had, some very, very talented superstars who were flamboyant as well. And I always remember that 2003. I was a surprise selection for the Great Britain squad. And Warrington did all right that year. We got into the playoffs, and we was competitive. And getting involved in that GB squad in 2003, I went in there thinking that I'd had quite a professional year, off the field and on the field, and just seeing the likes of Jamie Peacock, Paul Deakin, Mike Forshaw, Andy Farrell. It was a massive eye opener, because I'd not, and this is no disrespect to the Warrington players who I played that season with, but it was a big notch up, to see Jamie Peacock is 100% a leader, and it's not necessarily what he does on the field; it's the stuff that he says and he does off the field, and I think that it's so pivotal to have those characters off the field.
Yeah. I agree, and the luxury that we had with the Bulls at that time, there was a good mix of mature internationals that had just tons of experience, and young talented players that were coming in and feeding the energy levels. And you need both of that. You definitely need all of that. I experienced the same thing in 1997 when I went into the international team. Into the New Zealand team. I walk into the hotel, and everyone's having breakfast. I just got off the plane, in Sydney. I walk into the hotel, and there's all my heroes, all my heroes, just sat there, and they're kind of looking at me like, because I've never been a big player, and obviously playing in England, they're not seeing any of our footy over there. I knew Stacey Jones. Me and Stacey Jones were the halfback standoff partnership growing up our entire lives for rep footy. So I knew Stacey Jones really well. So I'm straight over to Stacey, thinking, well, I'm out of my depth there. And I did feel that way. And but when we came down to training, though, I was such a good athlete. I was gifted with some real tools that that was in my space. Outside of training, not so much. Inside in the training pitch, that was where I really sort of come into my own. But I remember the first so I was on the bench in my opening test, and obviously just doing some opposed work. And there was someone in the standoff just to give the back some opposed work from a scrum. And I remember just trundling forward, and Richie Barnett just puts a sidestep on me. And I hadn't seen anything like it. It's the step, the power that he got, and the speed on the back of it. I mean, he just disappeared on me. And I went, oh, okay. Inside my head I went, okay, it's got to be at 100 all the time. It can't be at 90. It can't be at 85. It's got to be at 100 all the time, because you've got to earn your right to be here. They've got to have confidence in you that you're the right person for the job, and you just got to be up there. You've got to stay there. So it was it was a nice little slap, just to sort of like, now own it. You've accepted responsibility back at club level. Now it's your time to try and solidify what is, what you're going to achieve there. And I got to admit, I was really, really blessed that probably New Zealand didn't have the greatest amount of halves to choose from. I had my career in internationals went from 97 to 2006, and that's a long time at that level. And some of those years, I wasn't playing my best rugby. I had some personal distractions at home, and I got to admit though, when I come into international though, I did really enjoy the environment, and it was a great opportunity to forget other things so you could focus on your game again and getting back to your best. And I think I did. I used to always use the New Zealand camp as a way of recharging my batteries and to go again. There was I remember when I became a senior player and it happened to me, I didn't think, I was a young kid who could get away with a lot. And then all of a sudden I became the senior player. And I remember we've been pretty strong for my size. And when I was a young international, I was bench pressing 120 kgs back in before sort of 2000, 2001. That was really, really quite good for a young player who only weighed about 80 kgs himself. So that for me was like, that was my goal, 120 kgs. And I remember when I became a senior player, I'll get under there, I just rep out 120 kgs twice, get up, chuck the weight back, and I'm thinking, yeah, Billy Big Dick, here I am there. And then the new breed of younger junior Kiwis, not junior Kiwis, but the younger kids, Louis and Vinnie Anderson, and they came in. And they're only 18, 19 years of age at the time. And they warmed up on 120. Did the warm up on 120. And again, it was one of those slaps where I went, okay, the game's moved, the game's jumped. There's a new breed of athlete coming through, which was effectively your generation. Your generation was the slap for us. So my generation we were the first that really started lifting steel in the gym as a part of what we do, power cleaning and that. So we were a slap to that generation before us because they were just good athletes. Your generation was the slap to my generation. They're like, yeah, we've been lifting since we were 13. We're strong and we're faster, and we've been learning the basics since we were 13. And so that was a real, I then had to change my game. So there was again a time to become introspective and start focusing on little wins, little growth things, and working with individuals to improve my game once again. And that's how it went. My game, my career. I was never at the top of my game my whole career. I had to keep doing these little jumps, kick starts, little slaps. And sometimes a little slap can be good. No one's above an ass whipping. No one's above an ass whipping, bro.
The thing is, Robbie, I mean, I don't say this just because you're on here, but in your day, you and Henry were classed as, certainly the best in Super League, if not the best half-backing pair in the world. And I don't say that, just because you're on the show. That's just how it is. The success that you had and the skill levels that you showed in your pomp is, we see it on highlight reels constantly when there's rugby league promotions going on. But I think more than anything, I think probably the best pairing that you and Henry had was in 2000. When you brought out the song "When the Going Gets Tough," I think that was probably your highlight career.
You know what? I have done. I made a point out of my career of never saying no. So if anyone challenged me with something, go up and speak in front of this audience, or go and do something, talk on camera, go try something. Never saying no. And like Brian McDermott used to say, well, this guy's just, you can't embarrass him. You can't embarrass him. That is, the music career is the one thing I'm embarrassed about. In life, you should stay in your lane. We actually got into the music industry. We did the cheesy stuff for the club, which was one thing. It's good fun and it's harmless. And it's great for the fans, and we had such a big kiddie fan base that stuff really worked. But then there was it was a label in Bradford that actually made a serious run with us at it. And we had a friend who was working in the music industry in London. He was doing he lived in an one bedroom bed sit in Elephant and Castle above a pub, bullet holes in the wall. And, just a kid that we grew up with, what we consider one of our brothers. And we decided to bring him up. We said, look, we'll do the music, but you've got to pay him minimum wage, but he's got to be in the band. I was a rapper. Henry didn't like rapping, so Henry became a singer. But this other kid was a rapper, but he was, he'd been doing the yards. So when you do like Run with the Bulls, which was the club song, and then you do Ain't No Stopping Us Now, and you do it in front of your own Bulls fans, and you have all of these little kids screaming. You actually start fancying yourself as a musician. It wasn't until Laz came up, and his stage name was Lazarus. His real name's Glenn Simons, but stage name was Lazarus. When he came up and he started doing real music, I was like, oh. Like I'm looking at the stuff that I'm writing, and it's just like from 1984, and it's to now 2004, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? And I really, really, I think one of the strengths that I have is being able to evaluate myself. Like, as a musician, I made a pretty good rugby player.
Yeah. Do you know what though? I mean, and you'll know Carl Fitzpatrick from your Salford days, but yeah. Because he's CEO at the Warrington Wolves now, if you was one of his players, you would be his absolute dream. Because I speak to Fitzy on a regular basis, and we're constantly talking about growing rugby league and the branding. And to be honest with you, Robbie, I think you're doing that. We need more of that. We need more. We need more
of the fearlessness.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, we had Martin Afire on here weeks ago, and he was talking about how he was an extra in Emmerdale Farm, and he was put on the TV, but he spoke about personally branding himself and saying that players need to take more responsibility. in order to grow them as a brand and then to put rugby league in more of a bit of a limelight. So as embarrassing as it is, that, Robbie, you know, that you're saying it's embarrassing for you, but I think it's a great thing, and I'd love to see more rugby league players doing that type of stuff.
I agree. So in my last 4 years as a professional athlete, I did a degree in marketing. So that's how I ended up doing what it is that I was doing. I was thinking to myself, so many of my ex-teammates were falling on hard times, you know, the transition from becoming an athlete to becoming something else, and they didn't know what to do. They hadn't prepared. So the ones that I was friends with were like, and this is like Scott Naylor, Joe Vagana, all of them were like into me saying, prepare your exit strategy, prepare. So I take a step back. What do I do? What do I like? One thing I want to do is leverage getting my head knocked off for 18 years. Let's leverage that, because I think it'd be, you know, silly not to. And the other thing is, well, I've always enjoyed the marketing side of the game, even though all I've been involved in is the promotional end product. So like, hey, there is, here's the cup, yeah, the smiley part. But I know that there's a lot of campaigning and bits and pieces that go on before that. So I teamed up with the University of Huddersfield. They sponsored a degree with me for me if I do a lot of ambassadorial work for them, which I am still an ambassador for them now, and I also hire all their kids as well. I live there. I live in Kirklees, which is in Huddersfield. But I then through my marketing studies and public relations studies, so my degree was marketing and PR. I started to learn what I should have. Well, it would be so much brilliant if I had had it when I was at the height of my prime of my game, because I would have been able to do exactly that branding, especially, and being able to leverage it when the game was at its highest profile. Now, the game was at its highest profile during the Rupert Murdoch and Kerry Packer wars, and that was the opportunity to leverage that profile. And the problem was there was some and I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the game full stop. Leveraging the individual profiles that we had within the sport. That was when the opportune time was. So it was quite interesting, because there was some training, a lot of media training that was going on. But what we were doing, we're teaching kids not to show their personality. And it's the personality, it's the narratives, it's the stories that people hook into. And that's what we need to do. And me and Fitzy, actually, because Fitzy was, I was in the middle of my degree when we played together at Salford. And me and Fitzy talked about a lot of things, because obviously Fitzy's similar age to me. We're both starting to transition out of the game. What are we going to do next? And so we used to actually have a to and fro quite a bit, talking about, because he was at the time looking at developing his own nutrition brand. And so I was talking to him about what you need to be thinking of, product placement, and all these, the 7 Ps as they call it. I think I handed him this textbook that was like that, which is just useless. I mean, it's good if you're doing an exam in marketing, because it covers absolutely everything. But for his specific thing that he was talking about, it would have been a waste of time for him. I know that now in retrospect. But yeah, like me and Fitzy have always got on well, and whenever I've needed anything, when he went into the role of CEO, he's always been great with me. Always got time for me. As you know, you create a brotherhood, don't you, when you play with guys? Providing you're a good person and they're a good person, you create a brotherhood that lasts forever. And I think that is something that we really should, as players, capitalize on. The head of the game that you and I are both working on, you're capitalizing on this now, where you reach out to me and ask me, will you come on my podcast? Yes, let's do that. But let's explore as a network what more we can do. I know Rugby League Cares are putting some thought into this aspect about developing a network of players that have gone on to run businesses and stuff like that, and that can help with that transition for the current professional athletes. And I said, look, I'll put my hand up. Any of the boys interested in marketing, I can teach them digital marketing. We've got videos, work modules, absolutely everything to do it. And I said, they'll have to come and do it for free, but I can teach them. And The reality is, if they're any good, well, okay, we'll employ you.
Yeah, and you know what, mate? The thing is, sometimes it can be disheartening when people have got to put their hands up and do stuff voluntary. But going back to Fitzy, I remember as a player at Warrington and Fitzy coming in to help with the S&C. And just by default, Tony liked his character and asked him, did he want to become welfare officer? And he took a completely different direction. Now, Fitzy did the S&C, voluntary stuff for 5-6 weeks. On the back of it, look where it's got him. And I think sometimes people don't see the bigger picture. They want the instant, success. No, I want to be earning a wage straight away. Sometimes you've just got to take a step back sometimes and said, you know what, I'm going to do something voluntary. I'm going to back myself. I'm going to show how dedicated and willing to learn I am. And like you say, if they've got that, then you're willing to employ them.
100%. I think that's part of that transitioning aspect that athletes need to get their heads around. That although during your years as a professional, everything was provided for you on a plate, in the real world, that doesn't happen. So 100% I agree with you on that. Being able to, because our sport, even though it does pay well in the context of a working class community, it doesn't play well enough for the longevity of your professional career. And for the majority of players, that actually still doesn't pay great. There's a few players that will be able to make a few £100,000 at the height of their game, but they come few and far between. The majority of the players are going to make under a ton, and they're not going to make that for a long time. Just to live for a long time. So creating an exit strategy and getting, I actually got asked this question by to do a little video for Rugby League Cares, and they asked me what's the one thing that you would do over if you're a professional, if you got to do your professional career again. I said I'd do my marketing degree when I was 18.
Yeah,
I'd do my studies earlier, and then what I could do from that point onwards is just volunteer and get that experience under my belt, and just learn and figure out stuff and learn and then I'd be made for a position. You have this. My career lasted from 18 years of age to 35, so that's a good long career. I think a horror when I look back how much time I wasted in coffee shops. Horror.
Yeah.
Just horror, playing video games, and just I get the work rest ratio. But I had Monday to Wednesday, where even Monday to Thursday, you play on the weekends, where my mind could have been working when my body was resting and getting that energy back to prepare for those next two games. And I know, because I did it in my last 4 seasons, that I could have done both. I could have juggled both. And in my last 4 seasons, I was forced to because I was coming to the end of my career. But I could have done that earlier. And, educational, if any young athletes are thinking about it now, the one thing I can tell you is that educational organizations out there, universities, colleges, they help you. They will help you. They say, oh, well, you got to do your exam there. Well, at university, I say, well, I couldn't make it. They know life happens for some people and you can't make an exam. So they'll move it to a date that you can. And I sat loads of exams on my own. I was often in the exam room with 3 or 4 other of my students that also couldn't make the exam for whatever, and they were in professional sportsmen. So it happens, they'll move, work. And let's be honest, the majority of the work is online now anyway. Yeah. So you can do it in your own time. So if there's any advice I give, do it early, create your exit strategy, explore what you want to do. Most will get there and go, well, I just wanted to be an athlete. Okay, you're an athlete. But now the world is your oyster. Now, do you want to work in sports administration, or are you interested in sales, or are you interested in, are you interested in working in going on site, building, construction? By the end of your career, you're not going to be able to lift anything. because your body's just going to be messed up. But you can do the hard work now, the management stuff, and then work that way, becoming a manager of people on site. It doesn't mean that you don't have to be in the industry. So yeah,
No, mate, I completely agree, and you know, this is a conversation that I have with a couple of people who are involved in rugby league, and my thing is, I'm big on work experience, because one thing I was never guilty of is studying. So even from a young age, you know, I left school. From 17, I was in a full-time working environment up until I was 34. But every single year I was involved in rugby, I studied. But if I was guilty of anything, it's that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I was just getting qualifications for the sake of qualifications. So if you want to hear you know, the variety of things I qualified as an electrician, I qualified as a plumber, then I did my personal training qualification, then I did a master's degree in strength and conditioning. So I got all these qualifications and never used them. And I'm in a completely different industry. So my take on it is, and when people say players need to educate themselves, get qualifications, I completely agree. But I think one of the vital roles is they need to go and spend a week or 2 weeks in that environment and actually see what it entails. Because sometimes a job on paper looks better than it actually is. So I'm big with the rugby league. I've said the same. You know, if players want to come and learn some work experience, spend 3 or 4 weeks within that industry, I think that is vital. And then they can make a decision. Well, this is something I can see myself doing for the rest of my life. Just touching on the finishing off.
I got to admit, just before you move on from that, Woody, that's better. That's a better version than what I'm talking about. That's like what I'm talking about 2.0. Bloody earth. That's brilliant. That's exactly what they should do. Because I'm not saying waste your time. What I'm saying is, you know, get on with getting good and enjoying your life. And I mean, I commend you for doing all that hard yards, you know, for yourself. You know, you've gone through the churn to realize that's not for me. And you then use that experience to reflect on, actually, I could have cut through the fog and got to to where I wanted to be earlier by just having that experience. So that's a lived experience that will definitely pay dividends. So yeah, any young players out there watching this, do what Woody says. You change the podcast to do what Woody says.
Might do that. Just finishing off, Robbie, but we've touched on it ahead of the game. You know, the Rugby League Curse charity, who I think, you know, Steve Mac does a great job within that, with Francis Stevenson and other people involved, and they've put this ahead of the game programme together as well, with which is going to run through the World Cup. But first of all, just tell us a little bit about it, and then why you're involved in it as well.
Okay, so the 2021 World Cup, the big USP for them is that they want to make social change within our rugby league communities, and they understand that with making social change with the direct rugby league communities can help make social change with the wider communities that they live in. So it's all about arming we start with our kids, really. So ahead of the game, effectively, what you and I and was the other 15 other ex-reprobate rugby league players, ex-professionals, we're going to be tasked with the responsibility of going into amateur rugby league clubs and presenting mental resilience and mental well-being program to the kids in the club. So we've got 3 target cohorts. We've got coaches, we've got youth, so young players, and we've got their parents as well. So it's a 3-prong attack that we can try and make our communities as mentally strong as possible. Why are we doing this? Well, because suicide is the biggest killer of people under the age of 45. Bigger than cancer, bigger than car crashes, bigger than drugs, bigger than all of those. And that's abhorrent. It truly is abhorrent, Woody. and that's why we're getting involved with it, because effectively it's an opportunity for us to give back, make a difference, and educate these young kids. The studies show that the elements of those sort of suicidal depression and suicidal thoughts often starts in adolescence, and that's why we're going to try to make a change and tool and arm these children at an early age. But not only that, but it's about educating them to watch out for the signs and being there for one another as well. Same for the parents, same for the coaches. Now, my journey with Ahead of the Game started in 2016. Personally, I went through a really bad period in my life. It was about the space and time of about 6 weeks, a month to 6 weeks. It started with the birth of my child, which actually, my youngest child, Emily, which actually is a great thing. But with that comes the responsibility of making sure that you're supporting your wife. And we already had a young son as well. The second thing was I was CEO at the Bradford Bulls, and we couldn't pay wages. I had a position of power, although I didn't have the ultimate power, and I was sort of a lone soldier at that point in time. Couldn't pay the players' wages, couldn't pay the staff's wages. There just wasn't enough money in the coffers to do any of that. There was some bad decisions made over the 2 previous years before that, and it had led to that point in time where basically there was no answers. I was left on my own, which found like a very lonely place to be. All the rest of the directors had disappeared, and I was left to sort of pick up the pieces, although I had no authority or autonomy to actually go in and pay anyone. It didn't matter anyway, because there was no money to pay anyone with anyway. But that responsibility all fell on my shoulders as people wanted answers that I couldn't give them. You know, at the end of the day, it came down to the owners of the business. And then the third thing that happened was the mother of my 2 oldest children, she passed away. So both my oldest children lived in my house. So this all happened in this space. I'm trying to support my wife. I'm trying to offer support everyone at work, players, a lot of moving parts going on there. And I'm trying to support my 2 daughters who very early, only 6 weeks earlier, had been told their mum had incurable cancer. And then at that point in time, 6 weeks later, she passes away, and my daughters are just devastated. And this is a lady that, this is a woman that I spent 15 years with, bringing 2 children up, a woman that we still had a lot of, love for each other, like a brother and a sister would. And we just got together too young and realized we were 2 different people 15 years later. So all of that, I obviously that can become really, really tough for someone at one point. I was relentless at home. The energy was relentless at work, and I just found myself just spinning. I was really, really sad. I was having to support my daughters and watch them, because as a dad, you just want to take their pain away. But at the same time, I was sort of having to push down that I was mourning myself. And then work was just throwing me all of these weird little, blindsides. I was dealing with staff coming in, irate staff. I was dealing with irate players, and it was just a mad mix. And I bottomed out, really. And this is one of the sad things, is that I hadn't prepared myself over the years to have any of the tools to deal with stress, helping myself be more resilient, be able to deal with the stress bucket and open the tap and pour some of those type of things out. It was a perfect storm, so it hard to deal with anyway, but I dealt with it in all the wrong ways. So go down and see the doctor, get beta blockers to deal with the anxiety that was happening during the day. At night time, can't sleep, boom, smacking the back out of all the diazepam that I use for muscle relaxants, because I've got two of my vertebrae fused together and I get mad headaches, but I'm using that for sleep. So you're getting fake sleep, you're kind of becoming a hollow person during the day, and I just couldn't get any answers. So listening to my wife, I listened to a very close friend that just sort of grabbed me by the shoulders and said, look, you can't not be there for your daughters, you can't not be there for your family, but you can take one of these things out of your life, and that is the work that you're doing. And understand, I'm a Bulls man. I grew up as a kid there, I grew up with the fans, me stepping away from the Bulls is like me breaking up with a lover. That's how it felt. And especially when all the responsibility was there. So the owners were on holiday, and I had to pull the plug on something. So I pulled the plug on work, but I waited until they got back off on holiday so they could manage the business. So once they got back, I just handed them the keys and I said, I'll steer the ship for a week, and then, this is the person I think is a great position to come in and take this role, but I gotta get myself sorted out. And what I did after that, I put myself into 8 weeks of counselling. So put all the drugs aside. I was angry as well, so there was a lot of anger there as well. And a couple of times I tried to deal with the anger with alcohol. And as you know, Woody, that's something that's sort of part of the culture when we're playing rugby, but it's the worst thing that you can do. It's a depressant. You never deal with anger with alcohol. So this is where the beads come in. I started a journey. So the first thing was to get over the mourning of leaving the Bulls, the breaking up of that thing that was such a big part of my spiritual fabric. There was the mourning of getting over the death of my children's mum, and then there was the getting strong again. And I understood. I look at it very much like an injury. That it's just another thing that needs time to heal. I don't see it as a weakness, but I did see it as an opportunity to get strong again. I felt that I wasn't weak. I just needed to get back strong again. Like an injury, I never felt weak. I just needed to improve. And then, so after the counselling, then I started doing a lot more work with Rugby League Cares. I started doing some marketing work with them first, so developing blogs for mental well-being, mental fitness, the 5 ways to well-being. And through the marketing, understanding, digging deep and learning about it, I started to learn more about mental fitness. I started getting stronger, utilizing the tools that I was promoting. Then Rugby League Cares saw that I had a real interest in this element of it. I started doing more of the charity work with them, which is one of your 5 ways to well-being, giving. So I started doing more of the charity work with them, and which made me feel really good as a person. This was my way. I wasn't in the sport anymore. I wasn't coaching anyone. I wasn't bringing in money for the players and creating great events for the fans. But this was my way of giving back to that cohort, which was definitely the players was working, help the fundraising, that sort of thing. Rugby League Care saw that I was really interested in the mental fitness side of things, so they put me on the mental first aid training, coached by Johnny Lawless and his team. We also did suicide prevention, a number of other different mental fitness trainings as well, and I've been a part of that. That has been a part of my journey over the last 5 years. The last 5 years since end of 2016. You mentioned the beads before. The beads are a physical manifestation of me looking after myself, putting myself first. Because I can't look after people if I don't look after myself. And 2016 was a stark reminder of that, because I eventually became hopeless to everyone. I didn't know what to think. I couldn't think, because the beta blockers were just numbing me. I wasn't sleeping properly because I was using, chemicals to get me to sleep, because I was dealing with so much anxiety about everything, and stressed and depressed because of mourning and everything. And so I pretty much daily wear these as a physical reminder. So when I move, they'll swing around. So it's not just about being mindful and meditating, which I do. I meditate twice a day, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon. I've been to study transcendental meditation, so I've taken it to another level. I learned meditation for a brilliant book called Mindfulness Meditation, and it gives you an 8-week program, gives you the science. I'm not a deeply religious person, although I do feel I'm a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person. So when it comes to meditation, the the theological background for those. A lot of it comes from Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and that sort of background. But that's not really my cup of tea. All of those sort of teaching, but there's elements of it that I did like, and I only needed to understand how the brain was wired in regards to meditation. So this book was brilliant that it sort of pointed everything out in a very practical, scientific way, which is the way my brain absorbed things. Then it gives you an 8-week program of mindfulness meditation with coached meditation through it. And by the end of that, I was a meditator. So and then I thought, well, I wanted to get the best out of it. How can I take this to another level? Then I found Transcendental Meditation, did a 4-day course in Leeds. And from that point onwards, I've Transcendental Meditation. I'll use it for, if I'm starting a new piece of work, like, for example, I might be writing a blog for one of our clients, which might be working in the rail industry. Then I've got to write a blog for a client that's working in the collections industry. Two very different industries, but it's hard to disassociate what you've just been writing when your mind's all in there to there. So what I'll do is I'll do a 3-minute meditation between the two things to clean my slate, cleanse the palate, as they say, so I can start on a new piece of work. Completely invigorating. It's something that is now a part of me, but it's not the only things. I exercise every single day, and that's such a huge part of it. My nutrition, my meals are really, really important part of my mental makeup as well. So my 5 ways to well-being. I always drop one out. So my giving element comes with the support that I give for Rugby League Cares and the charity work that I do for them in Movember. And obviously a big part of it's going to be delivering to all of these kids, because we've got a massive target to hit and ahead of the game. And we're going to have to roll up our sleeves to get out and do all of that. So that's the giving element, the physical element, obviously, the exercise and nutrition. We've got the mindfulness, which is a huge part of it. Okay, that's 3 of my ways to well-being. I always have a mind blank during these times.
Do you want to have a quick meditation before?
I need a quick cleanse. No, that's why we have these things, because we can just get out 5 ways. And I'll do it. 5 ways to well-being and mind. Connect. So a connect thing that I did earlier this year during lockdown, I connected with my mates back in New Zealand, and it's about reaching out and being in that sync with one another. And I said, well, why don't we take this time? I challenged them, actually. I was 6 months sober from January to end of June. And I challenged them to go 3 months sober from the end of February, because down under it's summer, but they have January off. So that's their August. But February, they go back to work. So I said, from February, March, April, why don't you guys see if you go sober? And what we'll do is I'll put nutrition guides into our group. I'll put exercises, and we'll have a physical challenge for those 3 months. And, I'll put positive reinforcement things, so like quotes, just because there was so much negativity going on at that point in time. So that was a way of really connecting with my boys, my brothers, the guys that I grew up with. So we had a cohort of about seven guys that went on it, and everyone just loved it, because we started off some basic sort of fitness stuff, and then really started taking it, notching it up a little, sharing the timings we were getting on the exercises and everything. So it was a great opportunity to just reconnect once again. And now that was physical giving, healthy giving, mindfulness, connecting. Learning. That's the other one. Learning. So during lockdown, I thought, okay, well, here's an opportunity. So rather than just, I leave an hour a day to learn more about digital marketing. I'll do that. And so between 9 and 10 o'clock, everyone in my business has to be educating, because digital marketing it just keeps evolving so quickly. So I said everyone has to spend that time that's your education time, getting yourself up to speed. But I thought when it comes to learning, it should be food for your soul, stuff that feeds your soul. And this actually comes back to that conversation that we were having a little bit earlier. So I've been learning how to play the ukulele. Actually, I can't rap. Realised that. It took me a couple of years. And I'm not a very good, I can play 2 Bob Marley songs terribly now. One Love and No Woman, No Cry. I can play those songs terribly. But that's been a joyous thing for me. You know, it's to learn once again. And it takes, all of these things just take up that dead time. Then you start stressing about stuff. And I've allotted these things into specific times in the day. So they've all got their, I call it green belted time, where nothing's allowed to come in this time. It's just got to, that's the one thing that has suffered though over our training for ahead of the game, and those 2 times bit straight into my evening meditation times. So that was the only thing, because I meditate at 8:30, and our ahead of the game training has gone between, was it 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, isn't it? So I had to adjust it. So what the government promotes the 5 ways to well-being. So I decided a long time ago to try and implement those into green belted time in my daily routine to create the habits of positive mental fitness, and it works. And it really works. And this is the thing. This is my journey story for those kids, is that you're going to get tested at times. We all get tested at times. But if you have the tools, you can help yourself. And there's that Les Brown quote: "I ask for help not because I'm weak, but because I want to remain strong." And that's sort of my benchmark that I leverage. That's the thing, that I want to remain strong. I didn't like 2016 during that period of time. It took me a while to get out of that. But I know that if I had had the tools before that, I would have dealt with that time a lot better. I wouldn't have had to reach for sort of like chemical help, chemical support. I would have been able to compartmentalize things and deal with it, because I personally would have been in a better place to make the right decisions, because I would have been at that point strong. And that's where these come from. That's what the head of the game is for me. That's my why. That's why I'm doing it, because we can all like playing rugby. We can all practice and create good habits in our training programs. So when it gets to that default setting, we do the right things when we're tired. It's the same thing for our mind. Practice, do the right things for our minds. So when it gets to that default setting, when you're tired, when you come under pressure and your brain is fatigued, you'll do the right things and deal with it.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I mean, for me, the majority of rugby league players that I speak to and that I know, and it's certainly not everybody, but I think the majority, I think we're all quite sensitive people. I think that deep down, we show that on the field every single week, that we're tough and that we can play this tough game and we can get knocked around, and physically nothing phases us. And I used the injury from the 2012 grand final when I ruptured my testicle, and it went massive, it went worldwide, and everyone said the toughest athlete in the world. Physically, I could handle pretty much anything. I've had 15 operations during my career, so physically nothing really fazed me. I kept bouncing back from them. But emotionally, even during my rugby career, I struggled so much. I just didn't have any coping mechanisms. And you've touched on it yourself. I've done the diazepam, I've done the drinking, I've done the substance abuse, so to speak, and and it just doesn't work. So that's why it's a big passion of mine to get a message across to set of people. And again, I love Jordan Peterson, and just to sort of quote Jordan Peterson, one of the psychologists that I listen to, he says, the abyss is coming, for everybody, because you can't go through life without going through some trauma. People are going to get ill who you love. People are going to die. You're going to get ill yourself. You're going to be made redundant at some point. You're going to lose your job. That stuff is coming. But it comes at different periods and more for some than others. but we do need to give people the tools to do it. And I think that with the working class background that rugby league's associated with, I think the type of environments we've grown up in, I think it becomes a little bit harder for us just to reach out. And it certainly is a strength to say that.
Communities, as the stats show, our communities, our rugby league communities, our working class communities need those tools, they need those tools that support the most. And that's just the black and white of it. It's our kids, it's our people that are taking their lives. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it doesn't affect every layer of society, but the majority are coming from the working class. And that's why this is such an important activity, promotion. It's so important that we play this part in it. And I just really do know that it's the right thing to do. We will make impact, even if it's not a matter of someone saying, "Oh, yeah, I'll go talk to someone." If it's a matter of someone saying, "You know what, Bobby over there, he looks like he's struggling," because that's part of what we're doing. We're teaching people how to see the signs, even if they don't have the signs themselves. And start that question, start the communication, and that's the important. Ask, listen, encourage, and then check up on them, and that's crucial. We don't. Our culture has been taught to stiff up a lip and just crack on and get on with it. And still, I still talk to some of the older generation now, and they're just like, it's the most alien thing to them. And that's what we've got to stop. We've got to make it easier for our kids to talk and let them talk about it at an earlier age. So when it comes to that time in their lives where they're going to be challenged by their own brain the most, they've got a pathway out. And let them know that actually it's okay. And through our stories, through our whys, and for a lot of them, they will put us on that pedestal, and they will think of us as being the toughest of the tough because of what we do. I think we're the best people positioned to do that, to say, actually, no, we can be vulnerable as well. And it's okay. And it's okay. It's all right. I think that's the key. That's one of the keys. We're many keys. I think I'm really excited about it. I know we're doing it for the right reasons, and even if it just helps one person, then it's worthwhile.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate, 100%. It's going to be a great project to be involved in and to work along yourself and the other guys who are involved. But Robbie, it's been great, mate. It's been fascinating to listen to your story, and we've gone well over an hour there. That's it's been brilliant. But I was keen to, when I saw you on the Head of the Game project, and some of these Zoom sessions come up, and I didn't know why certain people were there, and to listen to why you're there now, it's like it's took me back a little bit, because you don't portray yourself to come across as that guy that we see on TV. So I really appreciate your honesty and the way that you've opened up there and you've explained your story, and I'm sure people are identify with that. It's been brilliant, so I really appreciate it, mate, and
my pleasure.
Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, my man.